Welcome to Make It Stick. I'm Alma Derricks. I'm the head of strategy for IdeaCloud, and I'm joined by my partner in stickiness.
I'm Jeff Day. I'm the head of IdeaCloud. It's great to be with you.
We're excited today. This is the beginning of an era. This is the beginning of our very first podcast, our very first episode of Make It Stick, which is all about the art and science of brand storytelling. We'll jump into the different channels, the different media, the different nuances of different types of storytelling and how you can incorporate that into the world of business.
You know, and we're coming to you live right now from 9th and Main in downtown Salt Lake City, in the Black Feather Speakeasy, which you can access through our IdeaCloud headquarters next door. It's a little secret door, and it's the perfect place and the perfect setting for us to talk about what it takes to make it stick.
Absolutely. It's a place where we will not only bring some of our colleagues together, other friends together, to just dig into some of these things that we talk about on the regular, but we want to find a place to bring it all together and bring it to you. So
let's make it stick.
Let's make it stick. So this first episode is really all about the different modes of storytelling, ranging from cave paintings and campfires all the way through to today and all of the new digitally enabled ways that we tell stories, and even thinking about future ways that are coming, things in AR and VR and ways that we can be immersed in stories. So we want to talk about the nuances and differences between those mediums and how brands can best utilize multiple versions and multiple channels all at once to tell their story in a really effective way.
I think that when we talk about mediums today, I have a really fresh story and example I want to share. I did an epic cross-country trip just a couple of weeks ago from Texas to Utah. And I was helping my son-in-law and my daughter, our new granddaughter, move back up to this way. And what was interesting is that along the way, in our Ryder truck rental, we got a flat in the trailer, pulling one of the cars. And it was in West Texas, never been there before. It was like way off the beaten path. And like literally the city of Harmley, Texas, south of Lubbock, outside of Abilene. I think there's songs written about this place. And long or the short of it is, how do you raise sort of somebody to fix your tire at midnight in West Texas? That should be the song that I should go write. But the reality is it took a long time to do it. And we were on the phone with customer support, and eventually I tweeted a picture of the blown tire, which was almost immediately picked up by the brand. And what was fascinating about it is we were drifting off to sleep in the sunrise of the Texas sky.
That's a long time.
We could hear this air ratchet, bleep, 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 fixing our tire, which was activated by using another complete mode of communications, not the phone. So I think that as we're talking about different mediums today, it's really this notion of awareness and understanding of how brands interact with their fans and how brands interact with their customer service issues. And I was really grateful. I thought Ryder Truck did an amazing job of resolving our concerns.
I'm glad you made it back from West Texas.
We did.
So let's get into it on Make It Stick. So today on Make It Stick, we're going to dig in a little bit more about storytelling formats. Everything from cave paintings and talking around the campfire to where we are today with television and internet forms, and then even start to think about what's coming next, what's on the horizon in storytelling, things that are more immersive, interactive, and definitely technology-driven. And to do that, we've invited some friends here today to help us dig into this topic. First off, Jesse Parent.
My name is Jesse Parent, and I am the Chief Technology Officer for IdeaCloud. I've been in the software industry for about 25 years. I'm also a performance artist. I compete at the world level in, performance poetry, public speaking. I also do some improv comedy on the side, and I compete in bearding.
Bearding, there's some stories there to tell.
Yeah, it is a category my beard has a story to tell.
So what I love about Jesse on our team is Jesse brings such a unique blend of this really deep technical understanding of things and then the storytelling background. And I'm always a little concerned when he says slam poetry because I know what that is, but I'm afraid I'm going to get slammed, like body slammed sometime because I know it's coming. There's a lot of emotion in those stories.
Well, I did wrestle through college.
So you could get slammed.
So it could
still happen.
Exactly.
So
well, story slammy. That's perfect. You make me stick to the mat.
Yeah, quite. We're going to pin this down.
That's right.
And also here, Brett Tippets.
Thanks for having me. I'm Brett Tippets. I'm the the head of operations at IdeaCloud. I'm not a comedian, not a wrestler, and not the beard guy. But what I have loved around this topic is spent a lot of years building brands and telling stories for technology brands around the world, and it's a fun topic to dig into.
I think you could have a great beard, Brett, but I want to go back to something that you said. I cannot, however, but...
Nor can I.
What I love about this topic is so often when we think about brand storytelling and we think about storytelling in general, we think of the obvious ways of expressing a story. But today, we talk a lot about feeling a story and the different techniques, technologies, and approaches that can be used to express a story in very emotional ways. And I think that that's one of the most exciting things that we have in our palette of capabilities now.
And underneath the hood of all the technology and the tools and the things that we have is this fundamental sense of just being wired for stories, right? I mean, it's kind of built in all the way back to cave paintings and the ways we told stories to save ourselves, to communicate, to entertain ourselves. All those things are sort of core to where stories come from. And that's where the emotional piece fits in. You know, that piece of it has always been there for us, even before we had toys and tools and things that plugged in to do it, right?
Yeah, the idea of just, I love the fact that you go back to the cave painting, because there is a survival aspect to storytelling. There's the creation of empathy of like, how are we going to bond? How are we going to form a collective that is stronger than the solo? And that's a very primal instinct, that connection, that idea that we're not alone and we're trying to do something more than we could accomplish by ourselves.
You know, not too long ago, with one of our brand assets, Fort Desolation, we've spent a lot of time running around in central Utah. And for those of you who've ever been to Torrey, Utah, it's really at the what do you call, the on-ramp to the Mighty Five National Parks. And Capitol Reef National Park, one of the first things you'll see as you enter that area is some pictograph petroglyphs. And it's a really cool experience if you've never seen it before, because when you first come up on them and you actually look at the rocks and you see these pictographs, you think, okay, somebody at some point in time actually came here and wrote this story down of what was going on here, whether it was hunting, it was that they grew crops in the location, and you have this immediate connection to the land and to the people of the land. And I think that what I love about that is the expression of far more through the art. I'm a passionate believer in the expressive nature of art. And I think, again, that how do you get that kind of an emotion in words? And how do you express that kind of emotion also in real-time art, video, or digital formats?
I think that's interesting that the simplest of picture can do so much for us. Even, Jeff, you mentioned words. It reminds me of a brand story working with MasterCard years ago, where 3 words told a very powerful story. We were working on launching a new product for them, which was a credit card which you could control behind the scenes. You could set time of day it was used, what kind of retailers it could be used, all the things. Yeah. I mean, think HR professionals with business cards, and even think parents. And this story was, the headline was Teenage Daughter Control. Evoked a lot of information in just 3 simple words.
Did you see the closing ceremony of the Olympics the other night?
I didn't see it.
Okay, so this is your action item follow-up. The closing ceremony had this incredible light display that was used, a combination of real and projected content, on different surfaces. And it was just like bathing the stadium in these particles of light. And I thought to myself, we've seen some cool things in Olympics ceremonies before, drones flying in. We've seen, certainly fireworks and celebratory, but this was unlike anything ever. And as I've been reading about it afterwards, there was a lot of interpretation of what that meant, the power of what each particle of light meant in the world, the power of coming together, the power of just the concept of light. And I thought there wasn't a single word expressed. It was all visual. It was only possible through digital technologies. The company that did that is a group called Moment Factory up in Montreal, but it was part of the vision of the IOC as well as those in Japan that were hosting it, that this is an opportunity to express something to the world. And that's something I've always enjoyed about the Olympics. Maybe Salt Lake gets another Olympics.
Maybe.
Maybe.
We'll see.
Could be.
We'll see.
Could be cool.
Possible.
It is the brand storytelling
That's right.
epicenter of the planet, so maybe so. I mean, what I love about what you're saying, Jeff, is that, and as we think about stories, we think about them in books, we think about them in movies and television. But what I love that you're calling out is that you can step back from that. Stories happen around you, without words, with a few words. But you can walk through a story, and I don't think we think about stories in quite that way. We think about the words that make them happen and the pictures that make them happen, but you can also be immersed in a story completely around you.
Yeah.
And it changes things completely.
All right, I had a question for the group. I'm going to come to you, Jesse, first. What's the most interesting place you've been in the last couple of years that was an immersive storytelling experience?
Definitely when you start getting to these fringe festivals and you sort of seek out art. I went into a interactive clowning experience that was done by a clowning collective here in Utah. And going into the room, I really didn't understand what was going to happen. And you have to sort of give up some control, which is, I'm a pretty type A person. And I like control. I like to be the one that drives on the family trips. Going on an airplane is very upsetting to me because I'm not in the cockpit. But when you go in there, you just have to also accept that there's an artistic value to giving up control and being guided through that storytelling. And it was chaotic. It was weird, but there were a lot of visual metaphors there to take in. Sort of like you talked about with the Olympic ceremony, where you don't really need the words. You're kind of getting the story as it's coming at you, and it became this almost, this sort of weirdly primal urban experience that was nothing like I've ever seen before in my life. I don't know if it was something I would have actively seeked out. I just said, you know what, I'm going to try this because it's different and I'm genuinely curious, and I wasn't disappointed.
Wow, that's fascinating. I don't know if that would have been like my best dream or nightmare.
Clowns invoke like a lot, right?
It could be a haunted house more than a clown experience.
My favorite story about a clowning experience like that is I had my theater instructor talk about when he was 8 years old at a party, and this clown came in and just absolutely frightened him. He was terrified, and this clown was there to try to entertain him. So he's crying in the corner, and the clown tried to ease his concerns by saying, "No, I'm a real human." He's like, "Look." And then he grabs his nose and plucks it off his face. And it was the most shocking thing that he's ever seen. Like, oh, you just removed a body part. And you don't even think about that. But the idea of like just how a clown can change your experience from like joy or scaring is, I think it's like the cilantro gene, right? It's like, it tastes like soap or it doesn't. It's like you either love clowns or you don't.
All right, I got a little subroutine here for a second. I'm going to get something you just evoked. The way you told the story just now is so much a part of the medium, is it not? And especially in technology, in the technology world, how boring can it be? I mean, it's like literally put you to sleep. And so, Jesse, I mean, just your illustration of diction, tempo, hand gestures, facial, all of that needs to be a part. We always talk about the B2B, B2C connection, like, a lot of B2B companies might not think that the B2C values apply to what they're doing. It's like, no, it has everything to do with it. Everything to do with what you just described.
Because we're all human. We all have that desire, need to be entertained. We all, have a sense of all of that stuff can be used in our stories to evoke the kind of emotion and action that we want, right, as marketers.
And also you want to lean into it. I mean, I think the other piece of it is, and what happened next, and what happened next? And then the kid's crying, and then the clown's coming at him, and you're going, so what happens? What happens? What happens next? That kind of drawing you along. That's that emotional investment that you make in a story you're just hearing for the first time, right?
Amazing, Jesse. Alma, how about you?
The most immersive thing I've done that was completely out of bounds is a restaurant in Los Angeles called Vespertine, which is an entire building. So you start at the bottom, you wait in the garden, and it's completely, looking around corners, you're like, what's happening? So they sort of usher you into this Zen-like garden. You sit and have tea. It's just you. You're looking around. You don't see other people at first. And they usher you through various stages and up the stairs. And eventually you meet the chef who's standing there like Willy Wonka. No joke. Like standing there in the kitchen like this. And he welcomes you to Vespertine. And there are people scurrying around him. And then you go into another room. And there's the craziest one was there was a driftwood sort of piece on the table with what looked like seaweed hanging off of it or something, right? They bring over other things and you're getting little snacks and noshas and you're still not up to the top of the building yet. And then at some point they invite you to eat the centerpiece and you're going, what? And so everything hanging off of it was something edible. And so you sort of dug in. And so then you went up and up and up until you were finally in the dining room. I mean, it was 50 courses of little moments all through this thing. You're there for 3 hours. And talk about being just immersed. You know, by the time you're over, your tongue's just exhausted from so many flavors and, you know, just moments and little quiet moments and crazy moments.
Vespertine.
Vespertine. It's
Sounds
just
amazing.
Absolutely unbelievable.
Like, I love that it's a real journey. Like, it's an actual journey. It's a flavor journey plus a physical journey.
Right.
And the Willy Wonka reference, just that there's something really appealing about like that ownership of just welcome, if you want to view paradise.
He almost did. He almost broke out in song. It was
Yeah, that's great. Fewer children were killed in this. But yeah, the whole idea though of like tying that metaphor into that just special experience of just going through, that to me is a wonderful way to just explore that immersive aspect of it. And again, plug into this is a journey. We all get it. We don't have to say it out loud, but we know it.
No. And you just feel it, and you get pulled along, and you are just completely immersed about what's going to happen next. It's that edge of your seat feeling. Of,
Surprise me.
Now what? And you just give over to it. There's the moment, and that's that emotional piece where you just give over to this ride you're on.
That reminds me, years ago, my brother and I were in Berlin doing the classic, you know, tourist things you do, visited Checkpoint Charlie late one night. And on our way back, we stumbled literally into a museum, which didn't even seem like a museum. All it was, plastered on the walls, handwritten, were the stories of people and their experience behind the wall. How their stories of trying to escape, stories of we would, you know, darts across tied to a tiny thread that we would pull across to finally get to a cable and then escapes. It was not a pristine, curated museum experience. It was very raw and just pieces of paper plastered on the wall. But I read everything.
Did you really?
Floor to ceiling.
Powerful.
In the entire room.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I love the human connection, you know, that you have and how it brings things to life. I had a experience a few years ago when I was traveling in northern Italy to a city called Perugia, and it was the old castle. And if you've ever been there, the way you go up to the old city, you have to kind of go up this escalator, and it takes you literally through the old castle entrance. So as you're walking through it, you're seeing this 11th century castle, really cool. Then there's this room kind of tucked off to the side that it was like immersive Perugia. You go in, it must have been like the keep, you know, because there were no windows in this thing. I'm wondering what this thing was. But we go in, and it had projection installed in it. And the whole room, 360, the walls sort of evaporated from the brick into this projected story of Perugia and its building over the last 1,500 years. And it was fascinating to me. You know, it's like I really connected to where I was, and I had no idea half those stories. But the human connection, the immersive aspect of it, and the stories, you know, that linked. I just find that always fascinating. And it's so good to see so much of that in the world. You know, so many more places we go now. It's immersive storytelling is now the de facto for museums and artistic destinations, conferences, and so on.
And the things that the technology brings to that, right? I mean, that room with that projection, imagine doing that with, posters before there was the ability to project it. You know, it wouldn't have had the same impact as sort of surrounding you like a holodeck.
The room was alive.
Right.
Yeah, it was a holodeck.
Right.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it.
And that technology piece is really the kind of next phase. You know, it's what's taken us and propelled us forward for this next stage of storytelling, to just give us other pieces and parts to play with, right? I mean, that's the most interesting part about right now with the stories that are possible to be told.
Yeah. What I love about the technology aspect that you're talking about is it brings those immersive experiences to everybody. You don't have to just be in Europe in New York at a museum, those experiences can be brought to us digitally right wherever we are.
So a question on my mind is, what brands are doing this really well? What brands have got you excited, either in their immersive storytelling or their storytelling techniques, B2C, B2B, whatever you think is interesting? Who's got one they want to share?
There are so many cool technologies and things that have come out of COVID that have come into your home that have become these almost pervasive and maybe not immersive aspects. Even just smart speakers. If you think about that aspect of your life, where you actually have to invoke a brand to get information. And I was a person, I'm a privacy advocate, and I never wanted smart speakers in my house. And now I set them up like an intercom system with my Google speaker, and I got gifted.
You've succumbed.
I got gifted an Alexa, and so now I have to be very careful about when I have my friend Alexa over. But I don't even think we think about that from an immersive experience of just like how reliant we become on this. Even in this podcast, we talked about not saying the word Siri. Because we're so immersed in someone else's brand as an assistant that we have to now completely alter our behavior but we've been trained into this experience to actually say, like, this is how I'm going to change my life so I can make it easier by using your branded product, whether it be Siri, Alexa, or Google speakers, or what have you.
Yeah, I mean, I think about brands like, because I love the idea that the immersive piece of it and the spoken piece of it is part of the branding. I think of even social media and brands that are doing that well on social media because it requires a human voice on the other side of a tweet or the other side of an Instagram. It's not a brand, it's not a corporation, it's not something amorphous. There has to be a tone and a way that you approach life. It's a philosophy. It's a real person. And I've said before that I think a brand like Taco Bell has done such a great job on social media of being exactly who you think Taco Bell would be. They're sort of funny, they're sort of snarky, it's sort of late night, they're sort of eating junk food, and they're having a good time. And so that bro voice that comes back at you from the other side in Taco Bell always just makes me giggle because they just get it so on point.
They have fun with it.
And it's so on time. They're responding to real world events and things as well.
Let me give a slight twist to the question. What about a brand who understands the mediums? So call it the omni-channel, call it the mixed media, the fixed, the digital. There's brands that really get the wide range of ways to communicate. Is there one that inspires you that gets the medium mix really well?
Pokemon.
When
we think about Pokemon
which is
Go.
Sega.
Yeah. And now you've got you have real mobs of people walking around, getting out of their home, using augmented reality, and they're to the point of like they're going to Pokestops, they're buying things in app. They're having social experiences. They're getting more involved in these characters. They're getting into the stories, and I realize that it's a video game, but it's a marketing plan. It's saying like, look, I just turned your street into something that's filled with Charmanders and Pikachus, and then now I know more Pokemon than I ever wanted to. Just because I'm going around with my kids and having a family experience, and I realize you're trying to get into like more of the marketing of like how are we really like getting people to immerse and come into our brand. But I do think if you can invade someone's life in a way that's entertaining and they welcome you in, whether it's with smart speakers or augmented reality or what have you, that's a clear win. And then bringing that into like the conference environment, we're seeing a lot more augmented reality in these live conferences. Some spectacular things that are coming out of France, right? Where you're seeing people do performance art inside of augmented spaces. That's incredible to me as a technologist.
We talk a lot about live virtual digital screen stages devices in our daily speak. This has been the summer of the barbecue wars, right? I don't know if we call them the wars, but it's been the summer of barbecue. And the two brands that have taken the front stage of late are Weber Grills and, of course, our very own Traeger right here in Salt Lake City. What's interesting is give props to Traeger in particular because they've understood how to go from the physical to the virtual, across the social to the digital to the live, in a really powerful way. The thing I've enjoyed the most about my grill experience with Traeger is not only do I get to make great food, which is a live event, but I share that with friends in the community, and I'm using the app not only to control the cooking experience, but to share recipes and experiences otherwise. And Traeger's also just introduced events, that they do digitally. They've introduced a content network that is expressing sort of the nation, the Traeger nation, if you will. And it's fun to watch, Traeger and Weber kind of back and forth because, in full confession, I've got a Traeger smoker and I've got a Weber grill. They would probably tell me, you're crazy, why are you doing that? I said, no, I've got uses for each. So it's interesting because, again, here's mixed media. There's physical, there's digital, there's social, there's mobile, there's, I think a brand has to consider every possible corner when they think about the engagement. Now, that's a solid B2C. What could a B2B brand learn from something like that?
Well, and the power of brand ambassadorship, right?
Yeah.
That is your opportunity if you are invoking all of those different channels to your benefit.
Yeah. So you think about it could be like an Adobe. When the Adobe community comes together sharing how to work with a particular Adobe suite of products. I'm thinking of After Effects, for example. In the live event world, After Effects is kind of a default capability. I'm thinking of Disguise Media, which is another company that empowers these incredibly immersive experiences, but it's powered by the network of its creators around the world.
Yeah, that's interesting, the power of the community that can be built through a powerful story. That you bring up Adobe, it reminds me a couple of years ago at Adobe Max, part of the opening session, right? They were just going through new, very detailed product enhancements deep down in the product stack. But the reaction amongst the people that were there for just these little tweaks, you change this button to do this, erupted, right?
Yeah.
Satisfaction and brand ambassadorship all through that power.
Yeah.
And I think the lesson to learn from that for B2B is just this idea that everybody, even in a B2B product, there's something to get excited about. You have an audience out there who gets supremely excited, who's passionate about some deep skill, right. deep in one of the palettes. There's something cool that can be done. There's something for everybody when it comes to geekdom, right? And so if you are a home builder, right? And somebody out there is going to be excited about the doors that you choose, the windows that you choose. There are people that have granular interest in those things. And to sort of tap into, you always have to look at it from the point of view of those users. That's the key thing, starting to look outside in. But what's fascinating is that if you really start to embrace that geekdom, there's somebody out there who's looking for the perfect nut or bolt or screw or pencil,
right.
And when you find them, you will delight them and make them flag-waving fans for life.
Or that one pain point, right?
Yeah.
If you can make my life this much easier by giving me my workflow and making it that much easier, I'll fall in love with you.
Yeah. And if you do that, then they are going to start telling your brand story on your behalf.
Yeah, they're gushing it. They can't help but tell it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Nirvana.
Do you remember a few years ago when Lowe's introduced the virtual kitchen, setup labs where you could actually design your kitchen and utilizing their VR capabilities? I remember hearing Kyle Nell, who was the head of Lowe's Innovation Lab, speak at an event, and he was talking about the network that was activated on solving a very simple problem. What does your kitchen look like before you start working on it? And they were using some really cool technology at the time. It was really at the early days of VR, where you would build that kitchen and you'd actually come into a Lowe's, you'd sit down in your chair, you'd be able to look around the kitchen, see it all. But what it activated was the need of all of the downstream suppliers in that network to be able to virtualize their content so it could be viewed in context. So I thought that was genius, in the sense of not only utilizing new mediums, but also finding ways that they could activate entire networks of other suppliers that would be working within that framework.
No, and you're hitting on that thing about the pain points, just even starting there. If there's a starting point to just start asking the question, what drives my main customer? Absolutely insane.
Yeah,
What is
yeah.
the thing that they go to sleep worrying about, And is there a way for us to mitigate that? Is there something we can do? That part of it, that is an emotional connection right there. It always feels good to feel like a brand just gets it.
Yeah.
They just get it and they're just solving it. And, oh, that's the exact thing I was looking for.
Right.
The Lowe's one reminds me of my eyeglasses experience. You think about when you go buy glasses. It's like,
Yeah.
am I going to look like an idiot? Am I going to look like a dork? There's these round
Wait,
glasses.
am I
How do
the
they
only
fit
one wearing
on my face?
glasses here?
Not to pick on you, Jeff, but being able to go into an eyeglasses website and take a picture of myself and then virtually try on
Yeah.
things, that was super easy. It wasn't
Warby
virtual
Parker.
reality.
Or send them to you, right?
Yeah.
Or send them to you at home, and then you can look like a dork in private.
Yeah, exactly, in private, and then I can return them, right? But I didn't have to do VR. I didn't have to. It was so simple. It was just like a Photoshop layer, and it solved a pain point where I didn't want to go online because I didn't know what I was going to get. But you'll go to some glasses store and you'll try on things like endlessly and like how do I look? And your spouse is like, I don't know. You look. It's round glasses. But that helped me, and I bought like 3 pairs of glasses.
I think there's an interesting nuance in that story, right? Whether it be send them to me at home because that's the experience I'm most comfortable with, or is it I'm more comfortable or fine with just trying them online and providing that experience, right, across the needs of the audience.
It's even a kindness to just give an option. What do you need today? I'm here to help you in whatever way makes sense for you, right? That's its own sort of, be our guest moment. We're here to just try and help. We want our brand
That's
to
a
be
make
helpful
it
to
stick
you.
moment.
It is a make it
Yeah,
stick moment.
that's kind of, and that's what we're looking for. So how does this translate into the boardroom? A place where you wouldn't think that something like this could work.
Well, I think it builds on something that Brett said about Adobe Max and sort of the importance of those details. I think right away about Apple sort of changing the public release of a new product, just really innovating and changing the way we think about that. There are events, people tune into them like it's the Super Bowl because they've just made it so. And I think that kind of thing is the energy and sort of the twisting of the story that's just missing sometimes. It can be very flat. We've talked about that before, that it can be a very flat experience to just unveil a brand and unveil a new ad. It just sort of goes by, and in the noise we miss it. But I think making an event out of the release of a new phone is something, who would have thought if someone told you 5 years ago or 6 or 10 years ago that you would be tuning in and putting on your calendar, I need to tune in to the Apple release event. That eventizing that stuff is something that I think really works.
I loved how you tapped your phantom iPhone watch when you're saying, I'm going to set the event.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I love the question, Jeff, because how many presentations have we been in? Boardrooms, conference rooms with 120-page PowerPoint presentations, right? And to your question, being sensitive to the audience, right? Knowing that those executives, those recipients of our content have just come from another meeting where there was another 120-page PowerPoint being presented, and just stopping for a minute and thinking about, okay, basic marketing, right? What is the mindset of our audience, and how could we make this interesting, more impactful for them? Wrap some storytelling around it versus 100 pages of.
Yeah.
The ideal is always, to me, as a recipient of a lot of these pitches, has always been, if you can show me how you solve a problem that I have, then I'm in your corner. And the most effective ones are the ones who have done their homework and said, we understand that this is a problem. We're going to show you right now how we're solving it in real time. And it does, it gets back into that pain point, but it also gets into the how do I understand you? How do I empathize with you? How do I show you that I understand your struggle in a very almost primal way that all bubbles up to my intellectual level of saying, okay, you get it, you understand this, and now we can pick this apart, and now it becomes a we conversation rather than what are you going to do for me? It's how are we going to solve this?
I think that the tempo and the feeling in the room changes in a board meeting or an executive meeting when a creative angle is introduced. I have loved being in those 125. I hate being in those 125 slide presentations. But if you're sitting in there and you're kind of watching it, and there's some data that's just you got to see it that way. You can manage a meeting maybe a little bit more effectively by providing some pre-reading, so you don't have to suffer through that. But sometimes you do. But the room changes. The room changes when creative technique is used, and sometimes it's just a visual. It's a visual and it's a story, and sometimes it's the storyteller themselves. That is now using all those techniques that we talk about with voice and with tempo. And Jesse, I think you had a great example of keynote speech that you were watching with Adobe.
Yeah, I was watching the moments where the CEO, you could obviously hear in his voice where he had prepared something and then he went to improvise something that was not planned. And you have this sort of presentation speech. I always tell people that when you get on stage, you have a mask. No matter what, how thin that mask is the point. So if you have a performance mask, you have a performance voice. You are talking about some product, and the product is on the shelf, right, Steve? And then the shift might happen where you have a technical problem. It's like, oh, well, we didn't get that slide. Here's what was on the slide.
Yes.
And then
It's
you
the
just
human moment.
And then you just
Yeah.
go real human, and people go, I've been in that situation. I get this. How you deal with the flop sweat is what brings me in and sells me on your character and the excitement of like living that with you. I think we're all really reeled in, like you said, in the creative exercises of, I want to be surprised. I want you to show me something I wasn't expecting. And a lot of times in performance poetry, we call that the turn. It's like, how am I going to shock you and reel you back in because maybe you've toned out because of my performance voice, and all of a sudden I either change my tone, my message, I introduce something very surprising that's maybe shocking and invokes a laugh because you weren't expecting it. Why aren't we doing that in the boardroom? Why aren't we shocking people in a way that isn't career limiting?
That's interesting because all of those examples, as you were giving them, were moments for connection, right? You were disrupting something to create some connection. And I think, I've had some experiences in that boardroom where we've shut down when we get to that moment where we really want that dramatic pause and that impact to happen, we've shut down the PowerPoint and gone old school and just read a narrative.
Yeah.
No visuals.
Yeah.
Use old school theater of the mind, right? And that
It works.
It works.
It sticks. I
Right.
mean, that is a make it stick for sure.
The other thing that I've seen really work effectively, and it can be raw, it doesn't even have to be precisely produced video, but verbatims and stories from customers. It's like the museum in Berlin. Just raw video of customers saying what works, what doesn't, and just letting that roll. Not summarizing it, not putting it in a percentage, 20% said this or 10% said that. Take a look at your customer's face. See their happiness, see their pain, see whatever it is that this product's created for them. I've seen it effectively done with just simple cuts of just little verbatims from customers, because remember, in the boardroom, the other issue is the distance from those customers. You're at headquarters. You're not out in the field anymore necessarily. You've ascended into a place where you're not there seeing those things on the front lines anymore.
Maybe what you could do is go to your Google reviews, your Amazon reviews, and you could just start reading through. As many of you can take.
Yeah.
But I think it's a great example. I love to do that. Particularly like in our feedbacks, that we do here in our monthly reviews and our monthly meetings, is commentary is really, really helpful to get a sense of where things are.
When you're trying to create a moment, I guess the question that I always think about is, how do you choose the right format for that? Whether it's closing of the laptop, turning off of the PowerPoint, I'm going to just speak from the heart. I'm going to stand up. I'm going to walk around. I'm going to do a video. I'm going to create an infographic. How do you make the decision about it? Because what I think about is that there's so many ways now to send a message. We've got hundreds of spaces on the board that we could use. How do you get underneath it and sort of make the right choice for the right moment? Because you could try it and it could be off in some way. So how do you get underneath it? Where do you start with trying to pick those channels?
That's an interesting question, because I wonder sometimes if the power of those moments come through the authenticity of them being not planned. But it's a wise question because I think we can plan them, but at the same time being flexible enough to know that this is a moment to just let it happen.
Like change the medium. It's like I'm not going to go to the PowerPoint, the technology. I'm going to go to the theater of the mind, like you just said. I'm going to change the medium to something that's very personal. And the authenticity, that's really the through line of any good storytelling. Is I don't want you to lie to me. I want you to tell me something I can feel because I feel that it is true because you do.
Right. You felt it at that event. You felt that switch happen. Maybe wasn't planned, likely wasn't planned, but powerful nonetheless.
I think to the leader, to the manager that might be watching, listening to this conversation today, they would say, how do I plan for unplanned? What is that skill? Because if you're planning for the shock moment, it could backfire big time. But being, what would your advice be to that person that would say, I love this kind of open script a little bit, but I'm nervous because I don't have kind of that full flexibility that you might be describing. I've heard some really great tips today. One is shut PowerPoint down, narrate. Another is let the voice of your customer speak, and let that be the voice instead of your own. What are some of your other thoughts, like practical applications of how you could use a different medium or prep for it in an unscripted way? Is that even possible?
It is. Obviously, there's the rigor of actually going through those scenarios and improvising through those scenarios and some sort of like having a test audience that says, okay, it's a bit like when you're training for a fight. You want to find somebody who can fight like the other person.
We're going back to body slamming?
Yeah, this is the
subliminal message.
Okay, all right. Don't hurt Jeff. Don't hurt Jeff.
It's like when we're training for a fight.
Yeah, but you have
He looked right at you when he said that.
Yeah, those glasses. But you have to accommodate for, if this happens, how will I react? How can you throw a wrench into this so that I am prepared to be on my to think on my feet? Now that is a very rigorous way to go through it. You can also do mental exercises around it. The other things are to just you have to have a belief in what you're doing. If you truly believe what you're saying is true, honest, and genuine, and valuable, and that you have the best interest in mind of yourself and your client and yourself, it's very important to have that in mind. You can get through whatever by just sticking to this is true. And if you don't like it, that is fine. You don't accept this as something that you want, it's okay. I didn't lie to you.
Jesse, that's great life advice. I'm going to take that on both sides of the coin there because that's really good.
In practice, for me, it comes down to if I haven't done the 120-page PowerPoint,
right,
I'm not going to be able to deviate from that in a meaningful, authentic way. If I haven't done the homework, gone through the rigor, right, I maybe won't be able to create that moment because I might come into it, well, let's just create a moment. For me, that kind of spontaneity doesn't happen unless I've done the hard work.
Yeah.
Another thing that works for me is, and you can do it either in PowerPoint on one slide. I've even done it, talk about a different format, like a placemat, literally like a diner placemat, but where your presentation and your points are sort of laid out more like a Prezi in a way. So there's no linear thing, and there's no getting to slide 2 and then someone asks a question and then you go, oh, that's slide 54, and you sort of badly, turn it all off and try to find it. You sort of create a middle space where if I create one image that's I call them mall maps, right? You got a mall map of all the general spaces that you can be in. Inevitably, someone will key in on something. They'll say, well, I've been really thinking about, our marketing department, and the conversation takes off, and you can just gently veer, but you create an ability to let the whole thing flow without losing the contours and without losing the borders of the conversation. It's still all there. We need to stay in this ballpark at some point, but it introduces the ability to be prepared for whatever the components of the conversation are, sort of the 7 big themes, but you can allow the thing to move. And I've always found that it just helps the audience to, there could be something that happened that morning even that tips it in a direction that you weren't anticipating. Keeps me from having to pick the number one thing that you want to talk about and make it first, second, third, and just flow with the conversation. So I think there's kind of an interesting middle space. You're prepared, but you're prepared to talk about the chunks in a different order.
That's beautiful, because then your audience can self-select a bit what's most important to them versus us not knowing what's most important, taking them through a very linear agenda, and then, an hour in, finally get to that thing that is really most impactful to them.
So it's a little bit of a hybrid. It lets you prepare, but then gives you some flex in your spine.
Yeah. Psychologically speaking, there's a left brain and a right brain thing going on here too. Linear stories are tracking in one direction, and then creative stories may be tracking in a nonlinear. If I was to give one piece of advice, it would be to imagine what the good situation looks like. Good friend of mine, he currently leads Stratascale, a company that we love, and they do a really good job of just imagining what future is. And so they describe, what that looks like. And I think one of my, an example I've always loved in the past was when I was at Cisco, John Chambers had his sidekick, Jim Grubb, and they would always go to these moments that they would describe. They would actually visualize what things looked like. And so being able to take the brain into imagine for a moment, right? This is back to your Willy Wonka for a second. It was, what was his name? The original Willy Wonka? What was his actor?
Gene Wilder?
Gene Wilder. Gene Wilder, were you expecting Gene Wilder to sing, Come With Me, in the world of pure imagination? I mean, it was a song. He used a medium there, yet it conveyed sort of this imagination moment, other than, hey, follow me, we're going to walk right through here through that first place where in the small door and you go into the world of candy.
Yeah, what I wasn't expecting was what he did in the tunnel. In fact, always.
Wait, were you there?
He went evil in the tunnel.
No, when it's just like that's the nightmare moment for every child watching
It's
that
the
movie.
clown.
It's the clown. It's the clown
clown.
taking off the nose. It's like always turning, and it's just this,
Always
using that tone, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the magic of music, right? Is that like music also does everything that we've talked about. It's tone, it's pacing. I think what people forget is it's also rests. That people don't respect silence enough.
Yeah.
But the idea of like how music also brings in everything and becomes a bit of a nostalgia, like the stories that you tell. Like a good song just lives on. If I tell you about Cats in the Cradle, it's like, that's a really emotional song as a dad.
It is, actually.
Like to try to think back on that.
Boy, living in Detroit, I see that all over. Like when I drive downtown, there's so many like these great little memory spots, where Motown came to life, but it goes back further, and music has defined so much of the city that you listen to the song, you're in the venue or in the place, and you really make a connection to what the struggle or what the opportunity or the triumph was all about.
Yeah. How many times have you used a song lyric in a pitch? Just like as a title.
How many times have you sung your pitch?
Oh no, that's a little different. That's very different.
Jeff, would you like to demonstrate?
Yeah, exactly.
Come with me. We're on the Gene Wilder thing today.
And we'll see how you close a B2B deal now. I do think that it works just as well as any other storytelling because it's a shared experience that does a lot of work for you. If you can tap into shared experiences, you don't have to go through the song. I can just invoke the song, and it brings you to that moment and lets you relive a whole lifetime and then come back.
Oh, listen, we've got a ripping sizzle reel on IdeaCloud. The music, the energy. How many brands now say, I got to have a sizzle reel, I got to have a sizzle reel? And the music is powerful, in creating the emotion.
But I think what Jesse said is so true. It comes back to truth and authenticity. A great brand knows who they are.
Yeah.
And picking that music, picking that moment, picking that tone isn't difficult.
Yeah.
It's for me in branding, once you have that sense of who you are, it's like a compass.
Yeah.
I look at it like a cheat sheet. Once I know this is where someone's coming from, this is where this brand is coming from, this is our truth, this is our true north. If you could almost bang out 100 different questions of what would they like, yes, no, this or that, because you just know it. And it doesn't diverge. I think where you get tied up and get tongue-tied is when you're not really sure what you're trying to say, or you're trying to very carefully, like a Jenga tower, make sure that we say this and that and
Knock
the
out
other.
this block,
and
maybe.
one comes out and the whole thing falls apart. If you know who
Brett-
you are, it just flows.
Brett, you have pitched thousands of times. You've had them stick, you've had them not stick. There's an sort of an arc of how to deliver that brand vision, that brand strategy, or that new look and feel. What have you learned in your experiences about different mediums and making it hit at the right time?
I think there is power in the combination, like you've said, of music, picture, smart strategy, and the right words, right? That's why film, that's why, right? And we can tap into those same kind of things as we need to help demonstrate the power. Often the situations I find myself in are trying to take strategic thought, right? Insights from any category, culture, target audience, and really crystallize those down in the minds of, executives, marketers who have something already cemented. And we have to, Jesse, as you said, dislodge that so that you can see something new. And it takes the things we're talking about. It takes a little bit of theater. It takes a little bit of jostling. It takes the power of music to do those. Or it takes a moment to just pause, set the stage, and let authenticity speak.
So as we wrap up here, what really, when you think about storytelling, brand storytelling, and the different media choices you can make, the different channel choices you can make, what's the main takeaway for our listeners today?
For me, what I really loved was reinforcing on community. The idea of how do I get people excited? How do I make sure that I'm bringing in and really hyping up my superfans? You mentioned the Apple experience, and I love this because you use the word creating an event. And I think if you have like a running show, people think that it's always going to be there. But when you create something special, that you have the FOMO, that fear of missing out, and you want to be with your community, your people who get it, I think tapping into that is such an interesting part of this whole medium discussion, where you're really getting into, I'm going to use all of my avenues possible to create something that you don't want to miss, because you just are hyper psyched about not only what we do, but the people.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I'm inspired to just slow down for a minute, right? Whatever the next presentation that I'm engaged in, and to think, how could I make this more engaging? How could I really put myself even more fully in the mindset of those who are viewing, listening, and to make it more compelling?
Yeah, we call that putting the preacher in the sermon.
Yeah.
You have to put yourself in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. My thoughts on this are just the need to have total awareness of all of the mediums. So as you're thinking about the vocal aspects, of the live aspects of what you're saying, right through to the digital, to the written, to the visual, to all of the pieces work together, and the more awareness you have of that, the more powerful it can be.
And I think in addition to that toolbox, thinking about the environment that you make too, the environment around that presentation.
Almost
right?
sensory, like sight, sound, smell, taste, touch. You would think of the same thing from the different aspects of mediums and how those apply to your story.
So engaging all the senses, that's really what this all comes down to, that you're really tapping into the emotional power of tapping what people are seeing, what they're hearing, what they're tasting, maybe even in that moment, right?
Your restaurant example.
You pull all that together, and now you've got a really powerful mix of channels and ways to get at making an impact with your story and making it stick. So I think that really sums it up today. Thank you to our friends who've joined us. Thank you for all the great ideas and tips. Thank you for joining us on our inaugural episode. Come back to ride with us some more as we talk about the art and science of brand storytelling. This has been Make It Stick.